Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in tonight. I would like to welcome you all to this virtual book club hosted by the Taha Literature Festival. My name is Ujiha Haider, and I'm delighted to be in conversation with two of the most exquisite writers I happen to know, Sana Munir and Taha Kehar. We'll be talking about their forthcoming collection of short stories, The Stained Glass Window, Stories of Pandemic from Pakistan, published by Liberty Books. Sana Munir and Taha Kehar are the co-editors of the book. Taha Kehar is a journalist and the author of two novels, Typically Tanya and of Rift and Rivalry. He has served as the head of the Express Tribune's Peshawar City pages and bi-monthly books page, and has also worked as an assistant editor on the op-ed desk at the News International. In 2016, he guest edited an issue of the Equator Line titled Pakistan After the Stereotypes that focused on new writing from Pakistan. Sana Munir is the author of two books of fiction, The Satanist, a novel, and Unfettered Wings, Extraordinary Stories of Ordinary Women. Her second book has enjoyed tremendous academic success, being curriculum at ComSats and UMT for students of English literature. Sana's recent short form fiction has appeared in the ILF Review and The Bridge. Sana also writes for the News on Sunday and Urdu News. They both write beautiful book reviews as well. We'll be taking audience questions during the talk, so please go ahead and drop your questions anytime during the broadcast. Hi, how are you guys doing this evening? Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I can. Very well, thank you, Ujiha.
Hi, how are you guys doing this evening?
Oh, very well, very excited. How about you?
I'm good. So, okay, so would you want to tell us a bit about the anthology first?
Perfect. Would you like to begin, Sana, or should I?
Go
Both
ahead.
of you. Sana can go first and then Taha.
All right, all right. Well, it's a collection of short stories. It's an anthology that has been put together just to, first, just to engage different writers together so that they can put out their voice about their experiences and how they have been going through the pandemic. Because when we started this process, it was late May or June, I think. And that is when the peak or the arc of the pandemic was felt very, very strongly, psychologically, as well as physically and biologically by people. And there's some people who really wanted to express what they had been going through. Some people were finding it very hard to connect to writing or reading those days. But those who did, well, their voices are there. And I think that's how to introduce the book. It's the story. It's a collective document of our stories. Over to you, Taha.
Taha.
So, can you hear me first of all?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So this is basically a tale of two cities. Sana, as you know, is in Lahore. I'm in Karachi. We got together thinking that we need to produce something that captures what people are going through during this pandemic. So there was this curiosity about what people were thinking, what people were experiencing. And I would like to say that this anthology, this compilation of stories, it transforms that curiosity into a creative impulse. It's about experiences, but also fictionalized experiences. So that's what I would like to call it. It's just a creative impulse triggered by curiosity.
Amazing. So starting with the conversation, and this is something that I'd like to, ask both of you. The pandemic has been a difficult time for all of us in one way or the other, and it hasn't been easy to, accomplish even the most regular tasks of life. What inspired both of you to just go ahead and compile a whole anthology of short fiction on the subject? I mean, walk us through the backstory a bit.
Taha, I'd like you to take this first, yeah?
Taha, yeah. Now Taha can, begin.
It began with an Instagram conversation. I think we were discussing books, and I said, wouldn't it be great to have a collection of short stories on the pandemic? I think it struck a chord with Sana as well, and we just started discussing it. And by the second or third day, we had a list of people who we wanted to contact, and all the writers we knew, all the people who we thought would be interested. It just sort of, it was an impulse. Very spontaneously, we took this forward, and I think we were able to carry it forward, which is what made it more meaningful for us. And it was purely just spontaneity, nothing more than that.
Sana, what do you have to? Yeah.
Okay, well, the first reason that the anthology came, I think it started to take place bit by bit. It was just that was the only thing that was around us. That was the only discourse that was around us in our interpersonal communication, personal communication. Even when you find escape somewhere, you would read a newspaper, you'd go on social media. That was the only thing that was around us. So when there's something that's so, that's just, being showered on you from everywhere, I think that's one thing that really, you really want to write about it. That's something that you get personally affected by. If you see someone who's getting affected by the pandemic, someone who has got the virus, and since the time that we started off with this book or compiling it or reaching out to other people, it was the time when everything was in utter confusion. No one had any sound advice to give, not even the scientists, not even the doctors, not even the countries who had been through it. So, in such a state of confusion, the only thing that one can do, if writing is the cathartic process of a person, then the only thing they can do is just write about it, to answer some questions, maybe that they have risen in their own heads, and the questions which are not, they are not being answered by anyone, even by experts. So I think that is one reason that the stories, we decided to bring together a medley of voices, different voices other than our own. The reason that this is an anthology and not a collection of my stories alone or Taha's stories alone is also that we wanted different perspectives and different voices, different experiences to be reflected in one place. I think that is what was the basic thing behind it.
I guess with the fact that fiction is supposed to be a form of escape for so many people. But the prompt we gave our writers was, okay, don't tell us about a story of escape. Tell us the story of experiences that you're going through, but fictionalize them. So it was a form of process that helped them maybe in some way or the other talk about something that they were going through.
Yeah. So you believe fiction can be a form of catharsis during trying times, that it can heal you or help make sense of the currents of thoughts.
I agree. I firmly believe that. I don't think it's a form of escape, but it's a form of understanding what's going on with you, what's happening in those difficult situations.
Yeah.
But about catharsis, I think it's a mixed feeling that I have. Some people have this way of writing for catharsis. Most people, I think a lot of people that I connected with were finding it very difficult to read or write during the pandemic because they felt quite bogged down psychologically or mentally. It's not the way for everyone. I think it's something that we can generalize for writers or authors as well. But for those, for whom it is cathartic, yes, it's a very effective way, rather.
Yeah, true. The title, please go on.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, please. Okay. So, the book's title, The Stained Glass Window, is quite intriguing. Could you both tell us a bit about the thought process that went behind it and whose idea was it, basically? And, also, what does it mean to you, both of you, the title?
Can I go first, Taha?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Sana, you can go first.
Okay. But yeah, when we decided to put a title to the book, that is when, in writing process, it's a little difficult. It's a little different. It's just that before words come to me, images come to me, and I have to later wait for the words, right? So when the image of this book, when I was thinking about this book, the image that came to me were, it started from a cobbled pathway It started like, different shades of pebbles that were put together to form a path. The other image that came to me was a medley of colors. Another image that came to me was a kaleidoscope. And we were discussing these ideas. I remember that we discussed these ideas. And suddenly the thing that struck to me, it was the stained glass window. It was like that every bit of a stained glass paint has its own shape. It has its own view, hue, its own personality, its own shape when you look at it individually, just like the stories in the collection. But when you just sit back and look at the picture or look at the painting in a wholesome view, it all comes together. So it was something like that. That's what the stained glass window means to us. That's how it is. Taha.
Okay, so more often than not, when you come across a compilation or anthology, the title story is, one of the best stories we have. And we have great stories, and we didn't want to pick one in particular because that would be singling one story out and not the other. So when we came up with this idea, we constantly kept thinking about what our book would be called. And we wondered for a very long time that we dabbled with these thoughts about what it would be. And then we just chanced upon this stained glass window, this concept of a stained glass window. And it meant different things to the both of us. For her, for Sana here, it was an image. For me, it was almost like an experience. I think it was for her as well, but the experience of sitting in a room where you have a stained glass window, and more often than not, looking out of that window, you keep trying to see what's outside of that window, and you have this play of light, the sunlight streaming through and drifting in different patterns through the room. And you're in that room for the entire day. You're trying to make sense of the patterns, the changing patterns throughout the day. So for me, it was uh, a story of how we exist in those confined spaces and we still look outwards. And the stained glass window was the perfect image for that.
Yeah, the title is amazing. It's very interesting. So the one thing that really came at me was, another thing that really came at me was the diversity of writers and the wide variety of writing techniques that you guys have used in this collection. There are themes of loneliness, despair, hopelessness on one side, and joy, humor, splendor on the other. The stories portray the points of view of characters of different genders and ages, all focusing on human dilemma and a plethora of experience. Uh, was this always a part of the plan, or did it just happen? Taha, you can go first.
Well, you're making me disclose secrets here, but
Yeah, that actually was something that I was. Yeah,
so it
please go
was
ahead.
so the diversity aspect was something that was intentional. But at the end of the day, whatever prompt we gave them, all the writers, we gave them a few ideas. Tell us something about the lockdown, something about the virus. Just it seems like words were thrown at them, and they had to become the measure of their imagination. So the diversity probably stems from there. We approached a lot of authors, a lot of new writers as well, and we gave them the space to explore the theme in their own way. And maybe that's where the diversity comes from. However, I do feel that in that diversity, we ended up producing work from different people, different kinds of writers. We had new authors and old authors. Each of them had something new to say, and they were experiencing a diverse spectrum of emotions during that period of time, because we often forget that the pandemic didn't affect, or rather doesn't at this point, affect everyone in the same way. There were moments of joy, moments of distress, and there were also moments of complete chaos. So it was important for us to talk about each of these aspects. And now that I think about it in retrospect, what we were trying to do was immortalize the memory of this pandemic. And we had to capture all the nuances, all the experiences. Without that, maybe we would just produce this bleak book about despair and sadness, and there wouldn't be a shade of meaning, shade of life. So I think that was deliberate, but also at the same time, something that our contributors took further.
Yeah, Sana, you can.
When we reached out to people, especially those authors who had already been published before, we had already read their works. So we more or less knew what their style would be and what kind of tilt their writing would have. There was some sort of an idea, because we are readers before we are writers, and we have, an understanding of a writer's style. So those people as well who had not written, who had not published before, there are also a lot of authors or young voices who have been published for the first time in this anthology, and that's something very I feel very happy about it. About those, even I had an idea, because more or less they had been connected to the literary society of Lahore or of Karachi in one way or the other. So that was something that we aimed at. We wanted to inculcate experienced voices as well as fresh, new perspectives into the anthology. So that was one thing. The other, that how the different moods of this story have come together, that is something that was anticipated, as well as it has some of them have been also been totally surprises to us, and we were very happy to have them. I mean, we had not given out any sort of directions to anyone, except for putting a word limit, for the writers, and we had given them a certain kind of genre: flash fiction and short form fiction. That was all that we were dealing with. So when they contributed their stories, they had complete freedom to whatever genre, to whatever narrative, to whatever arc, whatever discourse they wanted to discuss. And every story in the anthology has a very different flavor to it, and I think that was the purpose. That was the purpose of bringing different voices together, the different stories together. I think the purpose was fulfilled when we started receiving these submissions. It was glorious.
Yeah, that's what I noticed as well. Okay, Sana. So back when you guys were still in the initial stages of putting together the anthology, collecting stories and editing them, you mentioned something to me that stayed with me, and you just said this just now as well. You said that the stained glass window is just what it promises to be, a cobbled pathway where every stone has its own story. It is a beautiful sentence. Would you like to speak a bit on what you meant by that?
Okay, Vijaya, it's just that I feel that discourse is a very subjective thing. But when it comes from a group of people that live together in somewhat more or less similar situation, a similar conditions, even then it becomes like that story of the elephant and the six blind men. You remember we used to read that in our childhood, that there was this elephant and six blind men feel different parts of it, and they have a different opinion of that elephant. So it's just like
very
that.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. See, so while there are people who belong to very different demographics, when we were reading, working at, editing, putting them together, compiling this anthology, Taha will agree with me. We had so many things to consider. We had to consider the seniority of the author and the newness. We had to consider their age and experience and their freshness. We had to see the genre that they are going after, the seriousness, the bleakness, the darkness, the humor, whatever. There were so many things to consider. And when all of these things came together, we just realized that even the underlying theme, even if a writer has used one word, there's one amazing story in the anthology, Vajiha, in which the word lockdown has been used once, but the whole narrative keeps you ensnared in the environment of the lockdown. So when these kind of stories, or all the stories, when they started coming to us, they were submitted and they all came together. then we just realized that although the underlying theme is the same, still every story has a different personality. Every story has, a background of its own, and it would still go on if we had not put a word limit on the writers. So that is what I mean when I say it's a cobbled pathway. That is what I mean when I say it's a stained glass window, because it's a window. You can open it and look through it. I really hope we get to open this window and just look out of it, and the pandemic ends. I think that's a glimmer of hope, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So, Taha, I noticed that the stories in the compilation were very, they very smoothly negotiate the divide between the public and private spheres. That becomes so pronounced during a lockdown. Would you like to speak a bit on that?
So when we started collecting these stories, we realized that not all of them were about the private sphere. Not all of them were about people trapped at home. We were expecting stories of confinement, stories of despair surrounding the home. But there were people who were spooling outward, people who were trying to look at what's going on outside. I think the most powerful stories we have are either set within the private sphere and are still aware, very, very much conscious of what's going on outside, whether it's just the pandemic or whether it's the political situation, whether it's just how they will negotiate this new fearful world that they must live in. So we had some very fascinating stories. In fact, yours, Vajiha, I don't think many of you know, but Vajiha is not just the moderator of this session, she is our contributor, one of our many contributors. And her story deals with the public-private divide quite well. Would you like to comment on that? Sorry to turn this all around.
Yeah.
How was it for you, Vajiha? Let's hear it from you.
Let's hear it from you.
It's actually a very difficult thing for me. It was my it was my bread moment of the pandemic. Like some people made bread for the first time, during quarantine. I made a short story, and I think I felt the same kind of relief and joy afterwards. So
Amazing.
yeah, I mean, I was a bit scared and very nervous to write the story because I don't really do fiction, but when I got done with it was just, it was, I felt wonderful, it was like, and thank you, thank you so much, both of you to, to
Thank you
push
for
me
writing.
to do this because, it's like, it was a wonderful, it was a wonderful, joyride, of emotions. It was very nice.
Amazing.
I don't know how the
I'm
story is going to be, but yeah, the feelings were very nice.
I personally recommend Vajiha's story. It's wonderful.
Simply because it deals with the public-private divide so well. Because your character, without giving anything away, because it's a beautiful story and it should be read and savored for what it is by the reader.
Absolutely.
But it deals with a person who has something to do outside, which is cannot do it because of the world, the way things are happening around in the world. So I think your character is trapped at home.
Oh, so, yeah. Paranoia.
but still very conscious of what's happening outside. And that was just beautiful. So,
Thank you. So, okay, next question. So, this is something that is very, I find very interesting. You both live in different cities. Taha, you're based in Karachi, and Sana resides in Lahore. So, how did you guys manage the process of putting the whole thing together? What were the major challenges that you faced, and how easy or difficult was it?
Sana, you should go first.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna lie, I'm not very good with technology. I had to learn a few things. But then since Vajiha, we were learning technology anew again from everything. I mean, work was from home, school was from home, shopping was from home. So I think, when we were writing or we were compiling a book, then doing it from home was also one of those experiences which I learned from. It's just that, technology helped. I must say that we had a very transparent process. It was amazing. It was a very good experience because all the submissions were made and we went through them together. We made the edits together. We had to take turns, and we reached out to people. We had a system. It was very transparent, very open, very honest system, and that made the whole experience very joyful. I really enjoyed working together. It was very good. Taha, over to you. That was the honest thing.
Yeah, Taha, you can,
It was a tale of two cities, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And it was actually more cities because our contributors were all over the world, even though they were Pakistani, but we had a contributor in London, someone in Islamabad. It was great because we had to get all these stories together, and I don't think there were too many challenges that we faced per se. I think we were able to deal with all the technological hurdles quite efficiently. It was very easy to manage that. I think one of the biggest challenges we may have faced was making these creative choices as to where everything would go, how would it all come together. I think they were purely creative choices, and I don't think there were too many creative disagreements also, because we managed very seamlessly the whole process.
Okay, wonderful. So, Sana, there's an unmistakable flow of themes and moods in the stained glass window. So, given the range and styles of the short stories, how did you set about deciding on the order of the stories in the book? And did you follow a general pattern, or just something that is just random?
Vijaya, very mathematical about the pattern. I must say that we had to, keep shuffling, reshuffling these stories again and again. Since I've already mentioned that I'm pretty good with technology, so I would, do the editing part, and with Taha, of course, Taha also would do. But then most of the shuffling was done by Taha. I have to give him this credit because, just rearranging blocks of text again and again drives me really nuts. I'm not really good at that, and I didn't even volunteer. Thank you, Taha, you did that. I'm going to thank you here. But yes, the reshuffling of these stories.
Process before you.
We followed a very mathematical. See, Vijaya, we have two kinds of genres. We have flash fiction, and then we have the short form. So, if there are stories which are very lengthy, they needed a break. That is one thing. If the stories are very bleak, or they're dark, or they're very, disturbing, then they needed a comic break. So there are different kind of things that we had to keep in mind before we started, just arranging the stories. It's very mathematical. We have been, very careful with placing these stories one over the other. And also, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. So Umar Iftikhar is asking a question. So he has this question for both of you. Editing requires patience, and writers view every sentence story from their own perspective. How did Taha and Sana find a common ground to accept each other's edits, changes into the manuscript? It's a very good question. How did you work together?
I think we were able to.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Taha. Go ahead.
I'll follow through from you.
Okay, Sana, you can, go ahead.
Okay, it was very easy, Umar. It was very easy. In the beginning, when we set out to, we were just waiting for the submissions. Actually, while we just made a very rough sketch of an editorial policy. But then, when the story started pouring in, we started to see that there were things that needed to be addressed as per the policy, and also we started realizing that the policy will have to be very fluid in nature as per the submissions. And it was a very pleasant experience knowing that we agreed on almost every change or every movement of the fluid policy. Taha, that answers the question. You can go ahead.
I think it was relatively easy because we were able to respect each other's decisions regarding stories. We would discuss stories quite intensely before we actually got around to editing them. It was a lot of visualizing. Does this make sense? Does the story have a satisfying end? Should this be this way? Should it be that way? It was very exhausting at sometimes, but
yes,
I think we were able to do it, and we had conflicting schedules also because we all have our own jobs, our own responsibilities. and we had to find the time to do it. Often I would leave her a text, or she'd leave me a text, and we would see it maybe an hour later, 2 hours later, and eventually it would just flow very naturally because we respected each other's editorial choices, and we knew that the both of us were bringing in something different, something new, with our own respective stylistic choices, and yeah, that's what made it easier.
Amazing. So, okay, so Maheen Kamran's question next. As an anthology, you provided fantastic platform to new writers. Should we expect more in future, taking on board more aspiring writers? Both of you. Taha, you can go. You can go first.
I don't think we consciously went around looking for new writers, but it was serendipitous. It was just great that we got these new writers on board, and these voices are valuable because they're so different and so fresh, and not even, I'm not going to say they're raw, but they're so evocative. And I think we could be doing more projects like this in the future. I can't commit on this platform right now, but it would be great if we do.
Okay, so Romana Hussain is saying, love the title as well as the cover of the book. Now waiting to have it in my hands. Congratulations to both of you.
Oh, well, thank you. Romana is also one of the authors in the book.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Shamsi, yeah. So Muniza Shamsi is saying, congratulations on this terrific book, which covers so much and which I really enjoyed. And I loved the beautiful cover.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. This means so much. She's the person who has very kindly wrapped the book for us. So we are very happy to have her comment. Thank you.
Bela Riza Jamil is asking, will there be any readings today from the book? Yes, there are going to be readings towards the end of the session.
Towards the end of the session.
Yes. So, okay. So, Taha, the next question. I have been very intrigued about the whole publishing scene in Pakistan right now. So since the locally published book, what has been the experience like for you guys, and what would you like to share about your engagement with the local market? With the aspiring writers, who want to publish locally.
Yeah. So
Yes,
publishing in Pakistan hasn't really gained the kind of incentives that it deserved. And specifically fiction publishing is something that is, I would like to say, underutilized, not ignored. Because everyone is a fiction writer, and every other person you come across aspires to write fiction, and publishers do want fiction, but there is an attitude of not indifference, but they're a bit wary of taking on fiction. And we were also a bit concerned because this is our first experience publishing locally. We've both been published in India before, and we feared that there would be some challenge, but it was very smooth. And I think the best thing about it is that everything just fell into place. We feared that we would have a lot of challenges that never happened. It just fell into place very seamlessly, and that's what
That's
the
good
best.
to know. Very encouraging to know. For young aspiring writers especially. So Nashmiya Khan is saying, would love to hear more about the inspiration behind Gulmohar House by Huma Sheikh.
Great. This is an interesting story. Would you like to talk about it? Or?
Yeah, whoever wants to talk about this.
Taha, go ahead.
So this is one of our new writers, Huma Sheikh. She is a teacher, and she drew upon her own experiences in her own life. It's not an autobiographical piece of fiction, but it was just so beautifully done because she uses the image of Gulmohar trees, vivid effect in her story, and it's done so well because it goes back in time, and it shifts from past to present so powerfully. I think that's the magical thing about the book, the story. And we have a lot of narratives by women, and this is one of the more poignant narratives we have because it draws upon the past and the present in a very effective way. What does Sana have to say about this? Because I'm...
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it. For the rest, you will have to read the book.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's all. I think Huma Sheikh is in a better position to comment on the inspiration behind her story. So
yeah,
it's a wonderful story.
Favorites. It's a good story. So Nashmiya Khan is asking, which story is your favorite from the book? That is a difficult question. Sana, you
very
get
difficult. Sana, you...
book. That's a difficult question. It's like but you'll have to say something.
Well, I love all the stories, and this is not even me being diplomatic. I actually mean it. But yeah, if I have a tilt towards two stories, not one, it's just because I have a certain fondness for a certain kind of writing. So there are two stories. I'm not going to give the names for them, but one is by an academic who I really, really adore and admire. She's an academic and she's a TV and film personality. She's been very, very kind. Actually, the first person to agree to write. When I reached out to her, and took her a second. It's Naveed Shehzad actually, and it's her story. It's just written in the very classical English style, and that's because that's the field that she has been working in all her life. So maybe that's something that's reflected in her story. It's beautiful. And then there is another which is really cool. It's also written in a very classical style, but it has a very Pakistani touch to it, a very Urdu classical touch to it. So I think that is something that I really admire in bits of writing. That story, the other story, is set in Sahiwal. So it's got a very rural, very Pakistani touch to it. It's very important to me to connect two stories in a certain way. So these are two stories which I really, really, I think have great fondness for.
Taha, now over to you. Your story, your favorite.
It's very difficult. I loved every single story in this collection.
But you have to name one.
Amir Hussein's The Garden Spy. I just love the title and I love the story. And there's a 15-year-old who's written for us, and she actually had the virus, but she doesn't write about it in this really bleak, just depressing way. She writes about it so much. She has so much fun talking about it because she doesn't poke fun at herself or whatever she's going through, but she deals with it so beautifully. Just the human aspect of having the virus and dealing with it every single day. It's a diary format. And it's done very beautifully. So yeah.
So there's another question. It's Mazhar Qureshi. The lockdown period was particularly difficult for everyone. How did you keep the book from getting too dark? Taha, you can go first, and then Sana.
There has to be an element of humor as well in a book like this, because as I said, we were trying to immortalize this period, consciously or unconsciously, for the purposes of posterity. And we didn't want to create this really dark, gloomy picture of the pandemic. That's why we wanted stories that were slightly light, that made you laugh. As Sana mentioned earlier, we followed a very mathematical process of dividing the book. We had to move in every section from hopelessness towards hope. We were trying to lead readers towards from pessimism towards optimism, and that's why it was important to write something that was light as well. And I think I actually ended up writing a story for the anthology that was very light, to the point of being absurdly comic. And that was my attempt at keeping it really, really, really light at the same time and not taking it to a dark extreme. But we have another story by Nirvan Nadeem. It's a funny story. And the story that I just mentioned by Mehnaz Mir, that has humorous overtones as well. So that's just the beauty of balance, trying to find the right balance between darkness and the happier parts of things.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, Sana, now your turn.
Well, I think Taha has pretty much covered it all. I think that's I think he answer the question. I'll take the new question if you don't mind. There's one from Kulsum.
What made you to? Yeah, it's what made you to pick the stories from new authors? This is from Kulsum Bano.
Yeah, she's also one of the contributors. I'm so glad
She's
to see
another
her.
contributor,
She's
exactly.
also got a
Hello.
story here, and she's got a wonderful narrative. I think something that's very close to my heart. It's something that really she has. Although this is her first piece, her first work, published work of fiction. I believe she's also one of those authors that I reached out to, and I knew that they were longing to write. I know that longing for writing. So she was very happy to contribute, and I was very happy to receive a submission. What made me pick the stories from new authors? Kulsum, you see, we didn't really reject anyone, did we, Taha? We worked on the stories and we made authors work on them if they required to do so. But it has been a very, very good camaraderie that we have had with our authors, the writers. It has been a very enjoyable process, and editing was a joy. So it didn't really matter to us whether the story or the submission was coming from a new author or an old, because they were all very special, all very respectable to us.
I think the freshness of perspective just comes with a new author. They always have something new to offer, which is why it means so much to us that you people chose to contribute.
So Romana Hussain is requesting, please read a few lines from the youngest contributor, the 15-year-old. So who would like to?
Anna, would you like to do that? Or
you would?
Anyone can,
Taha, if you have a page with you, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you go for it, because I think you'll be able to capture her words.
I have it open in front of me. Actually, should I go? Okay, I've just randomly opened this page because this is a live question. I wasn't really prepared for it, but I'm just.
Okay, Taha, then you can go ahead. You have it.
I'm going to read it out. I'm going to read one or two passages. She writes in a very, post-modern style, with the.
We can go to the next question, and we can do this towards the end of the.
All right, maybe. All right, that's fine.
All right. So the next question is, okay. So I also feel that there has been an exponential increase in self-publishing in recent times. So on the one hand, it seems to me that it offers emerging writers opportunities like never before. But at the same time, this can make it truly difficult to discover treasures, literary treasures. What do you guys think about that? About self-publishing.
Self-publishing? Okay, well, this book is traditionally published. That is
no. So this is something unrelated to the book.
All right. But self-publishing, I think that since publishing avenues are shrinking due to shebang, I don't really want to go into that. But whatever the reasons are, a lot of publishing prospects are shrinking. So I know a lot of people who have gone into self-publishing. Anything I would say to new authors who are getting published for the first time or having the experience of walking down the very tedious path of publishing is always connect with a good editor, or two editors at least. Put your work through the process. Just because you have the freedom to get your laptop into a print form and get that print form into a bookshop does not mean that the book is also, it can skip the process that a book which goes through the traditional process. It can just skip those things. It can't. So always get your books edited. I think that is one thing which I would just like to suggest to you authors, because I have read one or two books, sent to me by young authors, 20-year-olds by themselves, and I felt that they could have used an editor. That's all.
Yeah, that's true. So Claire Chambers is asking. She's saying, "Wonderful session, and I can't wait to read the book. Thank you. My question concerns women. It's a good question. Do you think their experience has been different or more difficult in the pandemic? And is that reflected in the anthology?" Taha, you can go ahead with this. I don't know why I picked Taha, but yeah. Taha, you'll have to say a few words about it.
Say something and then I'll take it back to Sana. Of the 26 authors or writers in this compilation, 21, I think, are women.
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Or is it
That's
more? I think it was more than that. Maybe 22.
It's 20 authors and one poet. That's Mavish Amin, right? We have
Yes. So
Mavish
that's
Amin. So that makes 21.
21. Yeah, 21 exactly. So 21 women, and I think each of them have written in a different way. We have tales of domestic violence and abuse. We have stories about women negotiating the division of labor at home because eventually they found themselves at home with their husbands, and their husbands were still expecting them to do work, whereas the women had Zoom calls and work meetings, and then they would have to rush to the kitchen, and the husband would just be lazing about. I think Athiya Daud
Yeah,
captures
yeah.
that in her story so beautifully. So there was just
Yes.
such different things going on, and each of these women dealt with their uh, problems so differently, and that was the beauty of it. It was a diverse spectrum of experiences that came forth in this anthology, and Sana will tell you the rest because yeah.
Well, Bujia, you know
yes.
what? There are a lot of women writers in this anthology, not because we intended it to be this way, but that's how the response came. And this is something that was beyond our control. We had, we reached out to everyone, but then there was, a mounting response from women, and they started telling their stories. That the stories are not all about domesticity. They're not just, you know, not necessarily because they are domestic women, also because they are professional women had suddenly, found themselves trapped inside or just ensnared like the men. They found themselves ensnared inside the house. So there was a totally different experience psychologically. It was a very different experience with their filial relationships. Those things which can be solved easily by going out were had to be solved by staying in. You see, so there's something that really reflected in the stories. There are stories about doctors, who are working in the hospital. So that's something that there is also, very. It's like the poem by Mehvesh Amin. That's also very beautiful. I mean, that is something that totally encapsulates the whole the whole idea behind the book, or the kind of process, the psychological process a person goes through when they think of the worst that can happen to them during a pandemic. I think they're women, but they have very diverse stories to tell. Again,
Good. So Umaira Aleem is asking, what is the distribution of stories from different regions of Pakistan? Like how many stories from Islamabad, how many from Quetta and other parts of the country? If you can, go through this, rush through this, because we just have 10 minutes left. So Taha, you
we,
can go
we
first.
Sana, would you like to take that, and then I'll just carry.
Yes, we have stories from Islamabad. We have stories from different small countries, small cities as well, from bigger cities as well. So it was like, since this was not an open submission thing, it was something that we felt that we should personally reach out to everyone. It was, it was only appropriate. It felt appropriate to us that way. So whoever has responded, we have included their stories in it. There were some promises. There were some people who were reluctant. There were some people who couldn't commit because they were fine. They had things going on, and we totally expect that. So it's just like whoever has responded, whoever has submitted, has been part of the anthology. I think that's what was on us, and that's how we have dealt with it. We have not, let any story go. Not at all.
Yeah. So Asfar Suleiman is asking, the anthology format is not much explored in books by Pakistani authors. What advice would you have for new writers interested in narrating stories in this format?
So I think we've
Uh,
had anthologies in Pakistan. I think Vanessa Shamsi used to do these lovely anthologies at one point in time, and we have a few anthologies here. Now, what advice would I give to new writers interested in narrating stories in this format? I think we are comparatively lucky because our anthology it's on the pandemic, and I this is something I've been thinking about a lot because the short story format is very self-contained in many ways. A collection of short stories will take you more time to read because you will inhabit separate worlds all at once. But for our anthology, we'd probably be catering to readers who want to experience each of those worlds. So I think my advice to new writers who are interested in narrating stories in an anthology format is, what would my advice be to them? I think just explore different avenues. Just keep taking things
Yes.
further. I think, yeah.
So we have another question. This is Umar Iftikhar. He's asking, this is for both of you. Did any story made you so emotional that you had to halt your editing before resuming the reading editing process? Have you taken this?
A lot.
Okay.
A lot of them. A lot of them.
I think it took me, I think it was Kulsum Bano's story on domestic abuse, which was something, I mean, I read it was very late at night. And I remember taking a break from it simply because it was a beautiful story, but it was deeply emotional and it overwhelming in many ways. So there were times when I think the editor and the reader in us, we kind of clashed somewhere there. So it does happen.
Yeah. Okay, one last question, and then we're going to go towards the reading, very small reading session. Both of you write nonfiction and fiction. What is the distinction that you'd make between a short story and, let's say, a travel piece or a book review that you're writing? Or perhaps more specifically, is there a large difference in writing one or the other? If both of you can, just quickly say a few words about this. Sana, you can go ahead.
Well, of course, it's quite different, Fatiha. The similarity between writing fiction and for a newspaper, the only similarity I see is the responsibility as a writer. You know that you have to express an opinion just differently. You have to express it when you're reviewing a book, for instance, you have to express an opinion about it. You have to get into the writer's mind and bring that thing to the readers who are reading you and not the book itself. But then you have to be very responsible in your selection of words. You have to be very careful in picking your words and giving out your opinion. With fiction, responsibility stays, the nuance stays. I have to be very careful in picking my words and the narrative that I'm creating. But at the same time, I enjoy a certain kind of freedom, creative freedom, which I do not have when I'm writing nonfiction. Of course, that's something very, very calculated. Over to you, Taha.
When I write nonfiction, I know it's just me. So it's a very isolating process because I know I'm, as Sana pointed out, expressing my own opinion, trying to be responsible for what I'm telling the reader. But with fiction, I'm surrounded by characters. I'm surrounded by so many people. I sometimes feel like an eavesdropper, someone who's just hearing a conversation and just penciling it down somewhere. So I think there's a difference between fiction and nonfiction in that sense, because nonfiction can be very isolating, whereas fiction can be a lot more fun because you're surrounded by so many different ideas, and there's a lot more to do in that space, and you're surprising yourself constantly.
Right. Okay, so we'll quickly have a little reading session. Sana, would you like to go first? If you want to read a passage from the anthology, anything that you'd like to.
Well, I have a lot of favorite stories, but I think I'm just going to choose to read from mine because I feel that it's the right of the writer to read their own stories. I don't want to take that away from them. I'm going to just read one passage from mine. It's about a doctor. Dr. Jasmine Alexander ran the tips of her finger across the whiteboard, careful not to smudge the crooked lines drawn by one of her colleagues with a blue board marker. The rest of the duty roster for the day was written in black. In the earlier days, when she had to scrub the hate off the board, her heart sank a little every day. Then she began to chuckle, rather sympathetically, at the delinquent mentality, but after weeks and weeks of persistent display of discrimination, Jasmine had managed to translate the undue insolence of someone among the hospital staff into a silent resistance. Her right hand fumbled in the crossbody bag, and having touched upon a smooth, thin, cylindrical object, she pulled out a black marker, wrote her name, Dr. Jasmine, in place of what she had been erasing for over 1 year. And the word was, that's it.
Taha, over to you. Sana, that was amazing. Umar, if Tahar is saying excellent, excellent session, loved it. Okay, Taha, you can,
I'll just
Yeah, go ahead.
quickly do reading. It's from my own story as well, because I believe that the cadence and the authority with which an individual writer will tell their
Yeah.
story is going to be very different. So this is from my
Right.
story, those lonely lockdown days. Zara sprawled herself on the wooden floor of her terrace and watched the clouds dance against the evening sky, a pastime that allowed her to escape the lonely lockdown days. Since March, she had seen thick, ominous clouds form the most unimaginable shapes against the horizon. But today the sky was marked with white dots, much like the hair on an old man's scalp that didn't interest her. Dissatisfied, Sarah jumped to her feet and walked over to the dusty handrails. She propped her hands against the iron bars, even though Ammi had forbidden her from doing so. Rejoicing in this small rebellion, she peered down at her neighbor's manicured lawn and saw Mrs. Butt seated on a wicker chair under a palm tree. Zara leaned against the railings and waved at her in an eagerness to escape the prison of silence and communicate with her friend.
Very good.
Yeah.
So with this, we have come to the end of the session. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Please note that Taha and Sana's new collection of stories is available for pre-order on Liberty Books website. Congratulations to both of you, on the publication of your book, and thank you so much.
Contributors.
Yes.
And thank you
Congratulations.
so much. Thank you. And for your time and for the wonderful conversation that we had today. It was fascinating talking to you both about this book and the process that led to it. If there is anything you both want to end this conversation with, please do go ahead. Sana, you can.
I want to thank everyone who's been here, everyone who's read the book, everyone who sent in a good word, everyone who wished good luck, and all those wonderful, wonderful people who submitted their story. Congratulations to all of them, and thank you.
Congratulations to all the contributors, and thank you for taking the time out to write for us and for sharing the first lives of your stories with us. So,
Yes.
All right. So thank you, everyone. Good night, and see you well.